Welcome to the InDesign training on March 6th, 2025, where we're going to learn about the principles of accessibility that should be applied when you're working inside the InDesign tool. As I indicated before, we don't expect that MSF&W is an expert in the InDesign system, but that they can provide guidance about the principles that should be applied. And momentarily in chat, I will give you the checklist from the state of Minnesota for InDesign, as well as the InDesign link itself for their guidance on building accessible documents in their tool. With that, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Matt. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. As Dawn mentioned, this is Adobe InDesign Accessibility Training. I'm Melissa Romanato. With me again today to share presentation responsibilities is Tyler Winters. We're going to learn today what to do with your Adobe InDesign documents to ensure the most accessible PDF documents at the end. A couple of housekeeping items. As we mentioned, this session is being recorded. The slides have been provided. And you may ask questions at any time during the training. Feel free to type your questions into the chat or raise your hand. While I'm speaking, Tyler will be monitoring that so we can answer questions as they come up. All right, so let's get started. Today we're going to talk about, well, I guess I'll reiterate a little bit what Dawn mentioned. I'm not an InDesign expert. I can tell you the things that need to be done, the techniques that need to be used for accessibility. I might not always get to them in the most efficient way. You know, there are lots of menus, panels, right-clicking, lots of different ways to do things in InDesign. It's not a tool I use every day or even every month. So I might not get there in the most efficient way, but we'll get there in the long run. Keep in mind too that any corrections, the accessibility corrections that you need to make to a document, in addition to what we can do in InDesign, all those things can also be done in the end PDF, except for color contrast, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But so you can kind of learn what you can do here, and then decide what makes sense with your workflow and your process to do in InDesign versus at the end of the process in the PDF document. All right, so we are going to be covering these topics today. We're going to talk about how to mark text as headings in InDesign, how to create lists, how to add alternate text for images, and that includes alternate text for meaningful images, as well as how to mark images as decorative or safe to be ignored by assistive technology. We're going to talk about what we can do with data tables. And as usual, we'll talk about color contrast. We'll also talk about the reading order of InDesign documents and how to set that, as well as adding a title. We will also talk about table of contents and bookmarks in InDesign documents. And then finally, and very importantly, is the correct way to export your InDesign document to PDF in order to bring along all the accessibility features that you have implemented into InDesign. So I'm going to open a sample InDesign document here. Open. Take a second there to open, sorry. Those of you who work with it know that it takes a second for it to get all the pieces together to show us. All right, so I've got let me adjust my workspace a little bit here so you can see. I've got just a short, it's just one spread, 2 pages document that is kind of a piece of a real document that's been modified to include some features that we want to cover today. And one of the things that I'll be doing a lot is kind of zooming in and out to try to make it so that you can see the areas that we're focusing on. It's a little hard to do with InDesign, as you probably know, but that's the approach we're going to take today. So hopefully you can easily see everything. As you're probably very familiar, I can't make the other than the content area, I can't make anything larger. I can't make my toolbars larger. I can't make my panels or panes content show up larger. So I want to make sure that we can zoom in where we can, knowing that it's going to be a little difficult to see some things. All right, so we are going to start with headings for this document. And as we've said before, headings are structural markup used to provide a hierarchy of information in the document. It's kind of like an outline. So our main topic is our heading level 1. Our subsections are heading level 2s. If we have subsections, subsections, then those are heading level 3s, and so on. So we can make these designations of headings in the InDesign document. So we're going to do that. We're going to start here with our heading level 1, which is at the top left of our page, the chapter 5, apply your driving skills text. So I'm going to open my paragraph styles here. Let me get that showing before I go any farther. Okay, so I've got my paragraph styles. I'm going to select my heading 1 text or H1 text. And then I've got a few different options. I can edit the existing style. I can create a new style, a new paragraph style. I'm going to create a new paragraph style just because there are already styles in this document because I didn't start with it. So I don't want to mess up anything that might already be there. So I'm going to create a new style based on this heading 1 text that is highlighted. So to do that, I'm going to go down into the lower right corner of my paragraphs pane, and I've got the option here to add a heading. I'm going to click on that. And it takes kind of a second to see. And this is one of the things that those of you who used InDesign might be really good at. I'm not great at it, is to actually see what got added. Sometimes it's difficult to tell when I click this Create New Style button. So I think it created paragraph style 2. So I'm going to then edit that style. I'm going to, in this case, I used my right click, edit paragraph style 2. And I can type in a style name, and that will make it much easier for me to keep track of it. I'm just going to call it heading 1. And then the other important thing I need to do for accessibility, or the important thing, is to go down to the export tagging section of the paragraph style options window here. And at the very bottom of the screen, I have an option to choose what PDF tag gets exported with this paragraph style. So I'm going to drop that down. In this case, I'm going to choose H1, or heading 1 is what that stands for. And then I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice now in my paragraph styles list, I have a heading 1. I'm going to do the same thing for my next level heading, which is a paragraph 2, or a heading 2, excuse me. So I'm going to select that text. I'm going to use Create New Style. Again, I have a hard time finding what got added there. Try that again. Oops, that was not it. Excuse me. I think this is it. No, I edited it more than I wanted here. So let me try one more time. And again, I'm not seeing it. So let's try. Maybe I'm doing the wrong one here. Again, I apologize. Sometimes it's hard to see what's changed up above, especially on a small screen. It looks like I'm possibly ended up here in, I think there we are. Okay, so I'm going to, again, edit the style. I'm going to give it the name that I want, in this case, heading 2. And again, in export tagging section, I'm going to change that to a heading 2, so it actually becomes a heading 2. And you can see that things kind of have gotten nested here. Again, I'm starting with an existing document, so it has a lot of existing styles. Setting up your headings is something you might be doing at the beginning, at creation of your document, and not kind of after the fact like I'm doing. So you can, you can deal with that and set it all up ahead of time if you prefer. I'm just going to move this just to keep track a little bit better of where I've added things. And I do want to mention that you can have, just like you can in Word, you can have heading 2s that look different, maybe in a different section of your document. You're going to also have a level 2 heading, but it's going to look different. So you can have multiple heading styles for the same heading, or paragraph styles in this case, for the same heading level, just like you can in your Word styles panel. So I am going to go ahead and apply this heading 2 style to my other heading 2s in the document here. A couple more. And then it looks like I have one more heading level. In this case, it's heading 3. So these under 5.11, I've got a couple heading level 3s. So I'm going to try to add those. And again, I think that might be it. I'm going to say heading 3. Most importantly, I'm going to change that export tag to a heading 3. I'm going to go ahead and move that where I can see it. I'm going to apply that style. Oops. What I did there. That's not what I wanted. That does not look like the right style. I think I grabbed the wrong thing. Or maybe I edited it wrong. Anyway, you can adjust, the look. Let me try to start that one anew. I'm going to actually delete that style because I believe I went a little too far there. Let's try one more time with my heading 3 to create it. There it is. Heading 3. That up so I can keep track of it. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, and I'm sure those of you who use InDesign a lot could probably correct me, but I'm going to go ahead and roll with it. So I'm going to, since I've already designated this as a heading 3 in the export tag, it doesn't exactly look as pretty or as exactly as I'd want. I can modify the look of that to match the look in the original non-heading versions. But let's not dwell on that for our training today, and we'll just get that heading 3 style applied. Looks a little different, but the behind the scenes is the same. Another place that you can change those heading styles, if you kind of want to see a larger picture, you can use in the paragraph styles window here, you can use the options and go down to edit all export tags. And that kind of gives you the overall view. Notice that I'm on the PDF. I'm showing PDF export tags, not EPUB and HTML. And you can see where the heading styles that we set up are, and then you can see what tags they will convert to in PDF. And you can actually change those here. So if it's easier, you can set it all up here. This kind of gives you the global view, whereas the way we were looking at it before was the style by style view. This gives you a whole look at your paragraph styles all at once, and you can change settings here. So if, for example, that's not really supposed to be an H3, it's supposed to be an H4, I can change it right here as well. So a couple different ways to get there. A lot of it is preference. And again, probably recommend that you set those styles up at the beginning instead of trying to add them in later. Once you've already got a bunch of styles in there, it gets a little hairy. You also can create style groups so that you can group things in the paragraph styles, maybe put all your headings together, all your lists, all your sidebars or quotations, or your different styles. You can group them together. And I'm sure you already know that, but that will, help if someone else has to pick up your document at some point. Maybe you're no longer updating it or editing it, but someone else is. Having those accessibility heading styles already set up would help with whoever picks up the document. All right, I'm going to save because I haven't done that, I don't think, since I set my headings. Just like I do when I'm working in Acrobat, when I do something I like, I want to save it. So we want to make sure we do that as we go. All right, let's move on now to talk for a minute about lists. So when I add lists in the InDesign document, those lists will carry over into my PDF document if I've created them correctly. So I've got some content here in this first column. I'm going to select that content because I want to make that content into a bulleted list. So I can go into my properties panel. And way at the bottom here, I've got bullets and numbering. I've got my kind of typical choices, right, of a bulleted list or a numbered list. And then I've got some options for how that looks. So I'm going to choose a bulleted list in this case. And I'm going to jump into my options here. I can change the look of the bullet. I can do all kinds of things with the way it looks and the positioning. Maybe I want to change this so that my positioning is a little, so it's not right up there against the margin. I'll say, okay, kind of moved it over a little bit. None of those changes affect the accessibility of the list. It's really just using that bullets and numbering, using one of those options that will mark it as a list and carry it over into your PDF document. And you can create a paragraph style for the list if you want, and then that way you can, just reapply throughout your document. All right, let's move into images. We've got 4 images in this document. I've got 2 that are decorative. The first one is in the left page here. Let me zoom in, maybe a hair. Zoom in, reposition. One of the images is pretty small, so it might help us to have a little zoom there. So I've got kind of a decorative image here that shows a side view mirror. I've got another decorative image that shows the view from a snowplow camera, which is kind of cool. I also have a meaningful image in kind of layered on top of that one with a background. It's a little hard to read, but it says 511 Iowa. And then I have my winter survival kit image here on the right that tells me what needs to be included in my survival kit. So that's certainly a meaningful image. So to add the alternate text or mark an image as decorative, the first thing that we need to do is we need to select that image. For me, the easiest way to do that is in the layers panel. Because then I can be sure of what I am actually selecting and I don't have to try to guess visually. So I'm going to find my first meaningful image, and it looks like the first one's going to be that 511 app icon. So I found it here in the layers. I'm going to right click to choose select image. And now that image is selected here in my main view. I'm then going to right click on that image and choose Object Export Options. And this gives me a window where I can add alternate text to that image. I'm going to do that on the alternate text tab. I'm going to leave my alternate text source as custom because I'm going to type that alternate text into the field. And actually it says 511 IA. It's hard for you guys to read, but that's what it says. So just like I do with an image anywhere else, because this image contains text, my alternate text is going to exactly match the text in the image. So got that one. Let's move to our next meaningful image, and that is the Winter Survival Kit. So let's find that one. I'm going to find it in my layers and right click and choose select item. And now I'm going to right click on the image and go to Object Export Options. It kind of remembers where I was. So I'm on the Alt Text tab. My alt text source is custom, and I can type my alt text here. And in this case, I'm just going to list each item that is in the image. And it's a little blurry, a little hard to read because I'm zoomed in here, but hopefully we will not need winter survival kits for a whole lot longer. We'll get into spring. Boots, gloves, clothes, music and games, and last one, last but not least, jumper cables. Okay, I think I got it all typed in there. Again, I'm just typing my alternate text the same way that I would if I were typing it, in a Word document or whatever. I'm not using any kind of special punctuation or, spelling or formatting or anything like that. I've just made a list of items. I've got commas between them, and I'm going to say done. So I've got my alternate text added there for my two meaningful images. And now I've got a couple decorative images that need to be artifacted or marked as safe to be ignored by assistive technology. They add visual interest to the page, but they're not meaningful. Remember that, we have the test of would you say it to someone if you were reading the document over the phone? And in this case, I wouldn't bother, right? I've got words about the snowplow cam here that make the image itself decorative, and then this one just kind of fills the space. Maybe it has to do with blind spots and visibility and some of the stuff above it. Okay, so I'm going to select my first decorative image. Again, I'm going to do it in the layers panel over here because I find that to be easier. I've got the blowing snow image. I'm going to select it, and it looks like that is, sorry, I'm just trying to tell which is which here. Okay, yeah. So the blowing snow image appears to be the snow cam. So I'm going to right click on that image, export options. And for a decorative image, I'm going to stay or go into the tagged PDF tab at the top. And for apply tab, I'm going to choose tab and tag. In my apply tag dropdown, I'm going to choose artifact. So I'm going to say done. So because this is another Adobe product, just like Acrobat, it's using that artifact terminology. In Word, we use the word decorative. In Adobe, we're using artifact to mean the same thing. So let me get my other decorative image selected, and I'm going to right click, Object Export Options, Tagged PDF, and for Apply Tag, I'm going to change it to Artifact and say done. And that's all I have to do to mark those images as decorative. And now when I export the document to PDF, those will automatically be artifacts, and I won't have to do any extra work with my decorative images in PDF, and my alternate text will come along for the ride as well. All right, let me save. Any questions so far? We've covered the headings, the lists, and alternate text for both decorative images and meaningful images. Any questions before we continue? All right. Let's move on to data tables. That's going to be our next topic. I'm going to kind of center here a little bit so I can zoom in on the data table that I have in my document. I've just got a small one, just as kind of an example. I've got this little table with the speed and the warning time before a collision, just a little small table. You've got some choices. So if you want to add a table, if you don't already have a table and you're adding one from scratch to your InDesign document, I can go up to Table and choose Insert Table. And on the Insert Table dialog, I will give my table dimensions. So in this case, I would say that I have 3 body rows, 2 columns, and 1 header row. So the header row is important. So that basically identifies the first row, or the number of rows you say of the table, as a data table, as column headers, as containing my column headers. So it's important to have your header rows. If I did it this way and I just said, oh, this is a table with 4 rows and 2 columns, then I wouldn't have any header rows. So it makes this distinction between body rows, of which I have, 3. Whoa, I'm going the wrong way. All right. So I've got 3 actual body rows and I have 1 header row. So when you create your table, you can set up that structure so that you have column headers for your table. I'm going to cancel out of this though, because I already have my table. And in this case, I want to indicate that I have a header row on a table that I've already created. So I'm going to do that via the table menu. So first I'm going to select that row. And then in my table menu, under convert rows, I have the choice to say, this is a header row. I want to convert this to the header row. So I do that. Nothing changes visually. I've already applied some background styles to those cells to make it look a little different, to make it look like a header, column headers, right? Make it stand out a little bit. And that's something you can do just like in Word, does not affect the accessibility of the table. You can make it look the way you want. You can, center things. You can left align them. You can right align them. You can do what you want there. But really what's important for accessibility is indicating that you have column headers for your table. And obviously, we still want to use tables only for tabular data, just like we did in Word. We don't want to use them for layout. Remember that if we use them for layout, we can create some reading order problems. And also users who are using assistive technologies can use special table reading commands when they're in tables. So we want to make sure that those table reading commands work and that they are being used for tabular data. And this is kind of like a toggle. So if I go back to convert rows, you can change them back to body. I don't want to do that, but just so you know, in case it's an accident or you did something wrong, you've got a choice there. All right. I do want to talk while we're here. One other note, and we're going to be doing a session on tables coming up in May, or a couple sessions. But as we talked about with Word, we want to keep our tables simple, right? So I've got the same number of cells in each row of this table. It's not what we call a complex table. And that's also important because there's a lot of extra work you have to do in PDF when you use complex tables. All right, while we're here, let's talk about the ever popular color contrast topic. So we've said in the past that sufficient color contrast should be kept in mind during the creation of your document, so it doesn't need to be addressed in the PDF. It's very difficult to change colors in the PDF, and sometimes it cannot be done. And I would say that is especially true for documents that were created in software such as InDesign. So InDesign, as we know, has all these layers, right? And when it gets converted or exported to PDF, it's going to kind of collapse those layers. And sometimes you'll end up with content that is underneath or behind or basically not selectable without affecting the content that's above, below, near it, behind it, in front of it. And sometimes if you try to change color on a document that was created in InDesign, later on in the PDF, you will actually lose that content from the physical view. It will go behind the other content. So it's important, even more important, to address color contrast issues at the point of creation when you're creating your document in InDesign. So just like other softwares, I can use color contrast checkers to make sure that everything is looks exactly as I want. So, or meets those color contrast ratio requirements. So let me open, I've got the, I like to use the color contrast analyzer. Obviously, there are many tools out there. You can use whichever one you want, but I can use this tool just like I did in Word or just like I can in PDF. I'm going to select my foreground color, and in this case, I'm going to be checking this white text on my background color, which is kind of this darker teal blue. And you can see in my results here, I have a contrast ratio of 6.9 to 1. My goal is to have a contrast ratio of 4.5 or higher. So 21 to 1 is the highest contrast ratio that you can have. That would be black text on a white background or vice versa. So here I'm at a 6.9. That's not bad. It definitely meets my color contrast ratio requirements. If I was, being extra careful or maybe starting this document from the beginning and wanting to pick colors, maybe I would darken up that background color to a little bit of a darker teal in order to increase that ratio a little bit, especially if I'm going to be using that color contrast, or I'm sorry, that color pattern, throughout my document. Like you can see over, oh, sorry, let me try to a little bit here. Okay, so you can see, I've got that same combination here. I've got the same color used for my headings there. So, whoops. So I've got, I'm going to pick a theme, or maybe your document's going to have a few different themes. So go ahead and use that color contrast checker as you're creating your document to make sure that your color contrast is sufficient, because again, it's especially important in InDesign because you really are not going to be able to change those colors later on in PDF without potentially affecting the physical view of your document. And we definitely don't want to deal with that. All right, you might have noticed that I didn't do anything special to indicate my row headers in this table, and that's because I don't have that option in InDesign. InDesign will let you add column headers to a table, but it will not let you add row headers. That's going to be a step that we have to complete in the PDF version of the document. All right, let's move to our next topic, which is title. So we've talked in the past when we did some word training about the difference between the heading level 1, the main heading of the document, and the document's title. So while the text of those things might be the same, they're located in two different places. The heading is part of your document content, and the title is metadata for your document. So we're going to add that title in our metadata, and we're going to do that by going to the File menu, and we're going to go down to File Info, and that's going to bring up a window that allows me to type my document title right into this field. And it remembers what you typed before, which in this case is handy, but I'm going to take a minute and actually type it in. So I've got my chapter 5, apply your driving skills. So it does match, the text matches the heading level 1 of the document, but putting it into the document title is putting it into a metadata. It goes to a different place. Now, right now, this title will not pull automatically into PDF like it does in Word, but it typing it in here makes it easier to pull it into the PDF. And someday, when we export to PDF, I'm guessing this title will start coming along. So it's a good practice, good habit to go ahead and add it there, so that you've got it. It makes it a little easier in the PDF and eventually might make it a no-brainer in the PDF where you don't even have to think about it. So title is all I need there, document title, and I'm going to say okay, close that. I'm going to do a little save just because I haven't for a little bit. All right, let's talk about table of contents and bookmarks. So table of contents and bookmarks are two different things. So a table of contents is provides links to different parts of your document, and it's visible as part of your document's content. And bookmarks are kind of behind the scenes, and we saw these before in our Acrobat training, where we have a separate bookmarks pane that users can open, and bookmarks that are created based on the headings of the documents can be used to navigate to different sections of the document. So a table of contents and bookmarks are different, but they're kind of related to one another. So I want to talk about them a little bit together. So let's start with table of contents. You can add a table of contents to your document. Again, you only want to do this if you want that table of contents to display in your document. So if you've got a longer document, maybe like this one, this is one of maybe many chapters, you might want to have a table of contents at the beginning of your document. You can do that in the layout menu. There's a table of contents option. And here you would, you can go in here, you can give your table of contents the style. You can choose a style. Right now there's only the default style because I don't have any set up. You can give it a title, and then you can choose what paragraph styles are included in your table of contents. So, maybe I want to include all my heading twos, and maybe I don't want to go down any deeper. I just want people to get to the main sections of the document or whatever. You can choose that as you want. So you type your title, you can choose the style of that title, what you want it to look like. So typically the word contents or table of contents would be a heading 2. So you can choose that if you want. And then choose what paragraph styles you want to include. You can set a style for each paragraph entry. What do you want it to look like? What do you want between? Do you want the dots and leader lines and things like that? So there are a lot of choices in the way it looks, and none of those really really affect anything to do with accessibility. But the important thing that you want to make sure is checked, and it should be checked by default, is this create PDF bookmarks. So basically what this does is it says, I'm going to take the things that are in your table of contents, the actual table of contents items, and in the bookmarks pane in PDF, I am going to add those to the bookmarks pane as well. Totally up to you if you want this. Again, it's going to appear visually. Some documents call for it, some don't. I don't need it in this document. I'm actually going to cancel out of this window, but I did want to show it to you and talk about that relationship between table of contents and bookmarks. We know if your document is 21 pages or longer, you're going to be required in the PDF version to have bookmarks. There's a test for that in the checker, and it's very easy to fix and add those bookmarks in PDF. So don't feel like you have to have a table of contents just because you want to have bookmarks. So because those things are related, doesn't mean you have to have both. You can just have bookmarks and not have table of contents. Hopefully that didn't cause more confusion. Please let me know if you have any questions about the difference between those and the relationship between them, and we can look at it again when we get to the PDF and try to help clarify. All right. Another thing that we can do in the InDesign version of our document is we can set the reading order of the document. And I want to say this with a little caveat, and that is we know that when we're in the PDF version of our document, reading order is always going to be a manual check, right? It's something that is always going to show up in our manual checks list. We're always going to want, typically at the end of remediation, we're going to want to arrow down in that tag tree and make sure that content appears in the correct reading order. And we can move it around in that tag tree if it doesn't. So we're always, regardless of whether we set the reading order in InDesign, we're always going to be checking that reading order and possibly repairing it in PDF. So it's really your decision whether you want to set the reading order in InDesign, or if you want to wait and just deal within the PDF because you know you're going to have to check it there anyway. I'm going to show you how to set it in the PDF, I'm sorry, in InDesign, just in case you prefer to start with it that way. So I'm going to go to the articles pane here. So I brought up my articles pane. I don't know. It's, again, everything's small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically move my content into the articles pane, and then that allows me to reorder it if needed. So you can add content kind of piece by piece or you can add it kind of all at once. So that's what I'm going to do. I think that's the easiest. So if I hold down the control key on my keyboard and click the plus button at the bottom of my page, or the window here, it's going to create what it calls a new article. And an article is just like a container. It's like a section of content. And I can give it a name if I want, or I can just leave it with the default. I'm just going to leave it with the default because I don't really care what it's called. And then it has a checkbox on this window that says include when exporting. And I want to make sure that checkbox is checked. It should be by default. And it says, when it is checked, it says in tagged PDF, content reading order will be based on the article's order. If I uncheck it, it says in tagged PDF, the content will be marked as artifact. So it's a pretty big deal whether or not we check that checkbox. So again, it should be checked by default, but you're going to want to make sure. I'm just going to say okay here. And then it's going to take all the content, whoops, sorry, arrow keys don't work there, all the content and put it into this article pane, and some of it is grouped. And then I can simply drag and drop to rearrange things into the right reading order. So I'm not sure what's what or what goes where. So again, this allows you to set that reading order that will then be carried over to the tagged PDF. You're going to have to check the reading order in PDF. Personally, I find it easiest to just do it once and fix it once at the end. But I wanted to make sure you knew this option was available. It might be helpful, I guess, if maybe you have multiple sections or different people working on it. I'm not sure if you want to kind of share the load, right? Maybe you're the one dealing with the PDF in the end, and you want to have people do as much as they can in their section, so you have to do a little less, but you're still going to have to check it at the end. All right. There is also another setting in the articles panel under options here. There's the use for tagging order in tagged PDF. This is a toggle on and off, so I just checked it. It was unchecked. I'm not clear on the relationship between this and the previous checkbox I had when I imported everything into this articles pane. I don't know why those things aren't connected. I feel like they should be, and they're almost trying to trick us. So as well as checking it when you add things to the articles pane, you also need to go to options and choose use for tagging order in tagged PDF. All right. Close out of that. And actually, yeah, okay, I'll just close out of that. And I'm going to save again. I can't remember if I made any changes I want, but I'm going to save just to be safe. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this document to PDF. And I'm going to show you which options we want to use to do that conversion to bring along the work we did into the PDF. I don't know if it matters, just trying to get my view a little more normal here. Okay, so let's go up to the file menu. And the choice we're going to want is export, kind of right there in the middle. So we're going to export this document to interactive PDF. So Adobe PDF Interactive is the option that we want to choose. There are a couple other options. There is another PDF that's called Print, which I'm guessing will just create the physical view. So I always want to choose that interactive one. And when I click Save, it's going to give me this little export to interactive PDF dialog where I can make some choices. So on the General tab, which is where I already am, I want to make sure that Create Tagged PDF is checked. It should be checked by default, but double check it. I actually unclicked and rechecked it just to do it for emphasis, I guess. I also want to go to the Advanced tab, and I have a choice here to choose whether I want to use the file name or the document title as the display title. I'm going to choose document title because I want the title that I put into the file info, the meta information to carry over if possible. It gives you a little reminder there of what your title is versus if you choose file name, it doesn't give you that. Okay, so those are the two things I want to change or check. I want to make sure Create Tagged PDF is selected and document title, and then I'm going to choose Export. I've got a font problem. I'm just going to say, okay. And as we kind of expect, it's going to open that in Acrobat automatically for us. And then we can do the rest of our steps to make sure that this is an accessible PDF. So as usual, I'm going to run my checker. Looks like I've got my two normal manual checks, and then I also have a tab order failed. So we'll address that one as well. But there are going to be a few things that it actually can't check for that we want to make sure are changed as well. So obviously, the manual checks color contrast. We talked about that. We always want to make sure that we do that at the beginning. And we are going to check the reading order as well. We'll save that till the end. But let's talk about some of the issues that maybe it didn't catch. I'm going to open my tags panel. And one thing you're going to notice is that, well, I think I already have mine. Whoops, I already have mine changed from a document I was working on yesterday. So when you come into your tag panel, you're going to see some things you're not used to seeing, right? We didn't see these in our documents that came from Word. We're going to see things like stories and articles, and even our headings are going to look a little different. And we're going to have something called normal. If you want those to kind of look a little more like the tags we're used to, if you right click anywhere in the tags tree, you can choose apply role mapping to tags. And it's going to convert, for example, the normals to paragraphs. It's going to change heading 1 to H1. It's even going to change story to section. That's short for section. So it just gives it kind of a little more of a normal look. Totally a preference. You don't have to change it if you don't want to, but I did want you to know it's there, because sometimes people look and they're like, oh my God, what is this? This doesn't look familiar at all. I'm kind of lost. All right. So let's, as I said, we know our color contrast is good. We're going to save the reading order for the end. I'm also going to save that tab order one for the end. But we want to remember there was something that we want to do in that we weren't able to do in InDesign, and that is we wanted to set row headers for that table, because InDesign did not let us do that. So I'm going to, as usual, use my reading order tool. And, you know, I should zoom in here a little bit. I'm sorry. I forgot I'm in a zoomable area there, and I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here too so we can see better. So I open my reading order tool. I've got that table. I'm going to use my table editor, and I'm going to double check those column headers. So I'm just using my mouse here to select those column headers. I'm going to go to table cell properties, and you'll see, yes, those did come across as header cells. I made that change in InDesign. It does know that it's there. It doesn't bring along a scope, which is a little annoying. Not the end of the world, though. I'm just going to quickly set that to column. And then I'm going to select my row headers here, right-click, table cell properties, and these did not come across as row headers. I want them to, so I'm going to use my header cell and set those as row headers. So got me, you know, partway there with the table. I didn't have to do quite as much, but you know, you can decide how much effort it's worth in InDesign if you're going to have to come back and do these things in PDF anyway. So I've set my row headers for my table. I do want, the only, I think, other thing that I want to do is to double check my alternate text. And this is more just to kind of show you what happened when I did my conversion. So if I look at set alternate text, it's going to show me each image, and it's going to allow me to edit the alternate text. And it only shows me 2 because, remember, we only added alternate text for 2. The others we marked as decorative or as artifacts, and those did not get converted, so they don't even show up here. So everything looks good here. I'm going to cancel out. All right, let's talk real quick about bookmarks. So because this document is shorter, I didn't get any errors. It doesn't require me to have bookmarks. It has to be 21 or more pages to require bookmarks. But I do want to show you that based on those heading levels, I can choose new bookmarks from structure. I can choose, in this case, I'm going to say, oh, maybe just, you know, my heading 2s. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to type in my title at the top level here. And if I open that, it's got my heading 2s are now bookmarks that people can use. So again, you know, bookmarks are pretty easy to do in PDF, in Acrobat. So, and I didn't want a table of contents to show in my InDesign document. I don't need that for this document, but it doesn't mean I can't still add bookmarks from my heading structure. So I wanted to show you that that's an option if you've got a longer document. All right, now let's deal with reading order. That's our last manual check. So remember to check the reading order of my document. I'm just going to down arrow through. And I've got some kind of extra layers of containers, right? So I've got the whole thing itself. I've got this section. That's okay. Those are just containers. They don't matter. Don't worry about it. We just want to make sure that what's highlighted comes across in the right order. So I've got my heading level 1, heading 2. I've got my list there. I can actually see each list item if I want. Got my heading 2, 3, paragraph, going down that column. I've got an empty paragraph tag. I'm just going to delete it. So I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard. Then I go over to my second page here. There's my table. My table ended up over there. So I'm gonna drag it and drop it to the right place, or I can cut it and paste it, whatever you prefer. I'm gonna cut and paste. So I used Control X to cut, and it goes after my list here. So then I'm just gonna paste it there. So I got that in the right place. Get back to where I was. Got an empty paragraph and an empty section that was sitting in. Now I've got this paragraph. Let's grab it and put it after there. That looks good. I'm going to delete this empty stuff just to have a little less. Let's see. I've got a few pieces here in this kind of group of snowplow related things. So I'm just going to drag and drop things into the right place since I don't have to go far. Where's that one? Got a lot of empty stuff I'm going to clean up. Got the text that goes under. And then I've got my figure that I've added alternate text for. And I also have the text that comes before that figure. Okay, so I did some reordering here. I could have done that in the InDesign document in my articles pane. For me, it's easier to do it here. It's hard for me to look at the things, the pieces in the articles pane and understand what they are and put them in the right order. You might not have that problem because you're familiar with what they look like and how InDesign kind of labels those things and groups things. For me, it's easier to do it here. Even if you do it in InDesign, you're still going to need to run through and do that manual check. And so now I've got everything in the correct reading order. So that is my last manual check and I'm good to go. So I really didn't have to do much here. I had to, oh, I just noticed the title came across too. Okay, I did the only things I had to do were my manual checks, color contrast and reading order. And I did add scope to my column headers and I added the row headers. So those are the only things that I had to do here in PDF. I did just notice, and I'm pretty sure this is a new change. I don't know. Tyler, you might remember, I don't know. I don't think before it pulled my title over. You can see that my document title is on the tab and also in the application title bar in the top left of my screen. And I did not get a title error here. So it is pulling the title. So even more reason to put it in. I do have my remaining tab order. Not sure why I have that. I don't really have anything that's focusable, but this one's always easy to fix. Right click, fix. It's going to set tab order to match the structure, which is the tags, and I'm going to save. So pretty easy once I get into PDF. Really just having those headings and lists and putting in my alt text does save me some time on the PDF end. So I think it kind of depends on your workflow and where you are in that process. You know, are you taking it all the way from InDesign to PDF? If so, you can choose. Where would you rather do things? If you're using a template, then obviously you want to set up that InDesign template to be as accessible as possible so that whoever is using it can get farther along and there'll be less work in the PDF. So your workflow is going to kind of dictate, and your preferences, where you want to fix things for accessibility, whether it's in InDesign, whether it's in Acrobat. But, you know, obviously, if you're working on things collaboratively, I would say try to do as much as you can in InDesign, because it's usually just going to be one person who ends up dealing with the PDF. And if that person is you want everybody else to do as much work to make it as accessible as possible. Right. Any questions about anything that we did here? I guess all along, I was thinking mostly here in once we got to Acrobat, but if there are other questions, we can address those now as well. I think I just summarized most of these things. A reminder that you can't fix color contrast in Acrobat, so you want to make sure you deal with it in InDesign. So, any questions? Let's see, we've got one in the chat here. There is a reading order section and the tags menu. Do you have to do both in Adobe? So the reading order section, can you clarify what you're referring to, Lori? If you don't mind, you can just unmute and talk, or you can type, whichever is easiest. So I'm not sure if you're talking about maybe the reading order tool, or are you talking about the order pane, the reading order tool? Yeah, so the reading order tool is kind of misnamed. It's actually, the name of it has changed over time. And it does have some features that purport to show you the reading order or the page content order. We leave this on structure types because it's more efficient. This is not always in sync with the structure order that shows in the tags tree. And the assistive technology, regardless of what is showing here, if you have this view on your reading order tool, regardless of what it's showing there, assistive technology is going to use the order of the tags in the tags pane. So you might be able to make some changes in other places. You're still going to have to come back at the very end and make sure that the order of the tags is correct. So I find it easiest just to do it there at the end and not mess with it until then. There's some kind of disconnect between the reading order. It's more focused on the content and not the tags, which is kind of a fine distinction that might be difficult to differentiate. But the tags tree is what assistive technology uses for the reading order. So it's most efficient to just fix it here and not worry about the reading order tools, content order information at all. Just use the reading order tool for the other features like marking things or changing things to headings, to use the table editor and figure tags and those sorts of things. The reading order tool used to be called the touch-up reading order, which I always thought was weird, but at least then we used to shorten it and call it Turo, T-U-R-O. And then it went to reading order, which I've never liked because it's a misnomer. It's not really what it does. It does so much more. It does so much more, and it doesn't really do reading order well. So it would be nice if that were changed someday, but I think they're too far down that road. Any other questions on anything that we've covered today? Right. We are going to finish up then a little early. I do want to remind you that we've got office hours on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And that's a chance for you to ask questions, bring documents you've been working on, share those so we can kind of troubleshoot or look at problems or questions you might have. We've got a couple of office hours sessions coming up, and then our next kind of training session is going to be on Tuesday, March 25th, and we'll be covering Acrobat. That will be a repeat of the session we did way back in January. So if you weren't able to attend that session, or maybe you need to see it again or ask some questions now that you've been a little more involved in trying to implement these things, then we encourage you to come on the 25th to that Acrobat session. And we hope we see you soon in office hours. And thanks for your time today. Hope you all have a good rest of your day.